Hello, welcome to an interesting week, our weekly transits. And I thought I would start by having the aspect lines drawn up to show a very intense, interesting kind of a pattern. But I actually did it for yesterday because I wanted to see, and we're going to point out like Mars. First thing I wanted to talk about is, I mean, we're in intense times. It's intense stuff. Well, anyway, Mars is at the end of Leo, and then today it moved into Virgo. Thank goodness. It has been here for a while, like the last year, because it did its retrograde there. It went back in, back out, back in, back out. I think it's just been really exacerbating things. And, recently with this, these Iran and Israel exchanges, very interesting. Very interesting astrology. Maybe we'll get to some of that, but there's, especially yesterday with this actually a couple days, but we'll get to it with this volatile T square going on. But anyway, Mars will be finally out of that, getting and it'll go into Virgo, which I think will help a lot instead of just being dramatic, dramatizing over the top. And this is a critical degree. I mean, like crap, right there at that fixed sign degree, right at the end, it's always critical at the end. We got some of those, the fixed stars and all that stuff, but anyway, it's a intense place. So I'm just going to go to today just so we can move it on past it. But, and it was busy with a lot of things. There was a lot of patterns, but it will kind of slow it down and I'll show you the things that will be in play for a little while for us. Okay, so Mars changes energy. Okay, we've got all this changing signs, right? Changing energies, changing, all this stuff. I mean, we know the inner planets, but again, Mars, we had, the retrograde and it was in the same place for a while. Wasn't in its, naturally, well, I shouldn't want to say it. It was in a intense retrograde or where there was a lot of the degrees that it went over for a while, for a long time. So in and of that now, this is a very interesting little pattern that we have here. We got a few things happening. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to, since we're talking about Mars, Mars is involved in two yods. It's a yod is where, your apex planet, a yod is a triangle. Okay, think about it as it's a triangle, but it's a certain kind of triangle. So at the tip of it, we'll start with Mars being at the tip of this triangle right here. And we can see that it's being affected by this, if we follow this line down here, we go to Saturn because it's at 1 degree Aries. And then we're going to go this other line, which is 3 degrees Pluto. So we can see that as Mars goes forward the next few days into Virgo, it will get stronger in perfect over to Pluto, right? So this is like aggression is being it's like you can't it's not, nobody's on the same page, it's like it's not being understood. We've got Saturn, it's up against that in Mars. It's like, no, this is not making sense. This does not make sense. As much as Aries, is into war, it's not seeing eye to eye with Mars. And then Pluto isn't either, but as Mars is going to get closer to Pluto, it's going to aggravate that more. So that is going to be in play until Mars moves past those degrees. And let's just look at that for the moment. We'll come back. When will that be? Look at 1, 2, and it's now making that to over to Neptune. It'll be making that quincunx, and it's still going over to Pluto. It won't be till like the 24th next week. Okay, we got a whole really, really tense week just with that one thing. Okay, so let's go back. Okay, so we all need to be praying right now. Okay, so that's one thing. Mars, quincunx, Saturn, not on board, not on board with rules, with the way things are, with trying to structure it. This is mutable here. So I really think this is going to be the giving factor, I hope. And then Pluto, it's fixed. fixed sign, Pluto, it's not going to want to give. It's holding its ground, and Mars will pass that. Okay, now let's look at it from Pluto's point of view. This is the other yod. Look at Pluto is at the apex of it, of one side to Mars, which we just discussed. And Pluto's just sitting there, and Mars is buzzing around. It's applying. It's getting closer to making an exact quincunx over to Pluto. Pluto's just sitting there, not doing nothing, minding its own business. Yeah, you're right. But anyway, and then in comes Mars, and then it's also by Jupiter. Jupiter switched, changed signs into Cancer, and as it gets a little closer, moves up into the second and third degree, there it will get closer. So that will be in play for a little while. Let's look and see when that is. It moves a little slower. So let's just, okay, it's 2 degrees, Jupiter, 3 degrees next week. Let's see, wait, we're still at 3 degrees. Oh, yeah, the sun comes around at that. Oh, look at that. See, you can't help but not look at the sun going there to 3 degrees at Cancer, and we're looking at Jupiter. Okay, let's not get too distracted here. And then you look at Moon is going to come over this mess. So when is that? Next Tuesday, we're coming into this next cycle. But look, we're still looking at Jupiter. Jupiter is still 3 degrees, still 3 degrees. Now it's 4. Now it's passing. So 27th. So that's like a week and a half, right? Almost, before the 4th of July. And look at this pattern that's coming in. I mean, we can't not look at some of this stuff. So we have, we got the moon let's just look ahead because we're here. Moon and Mercury, it's like some um, feelings and mood is stirred up, and it's in Leo, all dramatic, over to the, squaring or square and a half over to the node, one node, and then half a square to the other, and then over to Pluto, and then, opposition. This is not, looking like it's going to be a real good day down here. Otherwise, we do have some interesting energy here with this trine and sextile that's coming in, but we'll talk about these things. We can see some of these energies, Mercury, there still might be some things happening. But anyway, we digress. Let's go back. Okay, so I just wanted you to see those two things and how long, like we've got one in a week and one in a week and a half, that we're going to have in this quincunx, this uncomfortable adjustment, a need for adjustment, a need for uh, communicating, a need for saying, look, this is, we got to work this out. This is not a good, it's like we don't see eye to eye. So how do we do that? There's always a window open. Mars, is sextiling over to Jupiter, and then it gets even nicer here as it changed signs. Like yesterday, it was still an applying sextile, but it was out of sign. Sextile implies two signs of the same polarity, but here we have feminine and masculine. But when we actually go to today, when Mars moves and changes elements, right, it changes signs, it gets out of that Leo, it gets out of just being roaring and this is what I have to do, and I'm doing this. Gets out of, it's interesting that there's no King's Day was at the very end of Mars in Leo, right at that 29th degree. Just interesting. It's just very interesting. Okay, so nonetheless, I mean, we know that there's controlling forces behind all this stuff, and there's just, people that know better and move money and power know this. Millionaires don't use it, billionaires and trillionaires do. I mean, this is just right here. So if you see these trends, you're going to want to take advantage of them. That is the interesting thing about knowledge, especially nowadays. So this sextile, this will be a good sextile. So it will have Mars maybe being in mutable Virgo with a cause, with a purpose, Jupiter expansive, being in Cancer, the home, the family, protecting the family, being defensive. But, Mars here is not just all about pomp and circumstance. It's about maybe rubber hits the road. It is an earth sign, but it's into being analytical. So maybe it can be where maybe we all analyze things differently. We all look at the bigger picture and being able to analyze the bigger picture, being able to see, it's like we're getting to a point with AI technology that we'll all have information at our fingertips that'll be phenomenal. I'm going through a financial astrology webinar now that's just amazing. But all of these trends that it marks, all of these, highs and low points, and has to do with, astrology as we study and know, but it's you can see these cycles with AI being able to spit out all these little nuances. It will be right there. Healing, AI and healing, putting in symptoms and having it correlate, the exact care and treatment and protocols. We're not going to need doctors. We're not going to need physicians. We can have robotics to fix things. I mean, it's like it keeps getting to a point of that very fast. We don't need arbitration. We don't, it's all going to be right there. This is what's kind of very, very interesting. Sorry for that digression, but it's kind of dovetailing with kind of the whole cycle of what we're moving into. But getting back to just moving today, so Mars energy, to transform, to protect the home, to uh, secure things, and having lists and ways of doing it. So the sun is also coming into that sextile. So as the sun, moves closer to 0 degrees, as it moves into Cancer by the solstice this week, it will be making that sextile to Mars as well, which is interesting. Um, the other side, Pluto over making the sextiles over to Saturn and Neptune. This will be in play for a while. As Saturn and Neptune move closer to that 3 degrees, they will perfect, but they will start their retrograde cycle in a few months. And then they'll actually move back into Pisces. So the pressure will be off a little bit on some levels, so that it still be sextile, but it'll be wider, it'll be out of orb, but we still have that in play. The trine that you're seeing is the moon, but then the other sextile here, which is kind of interesting, we have Saturn at the crux of both of these, and we can see as Uranus moves into the next sign, it will be then into a masculine sign, and then that will be closer sextile. It's still there here with an orb, but it'll get closer to Saturn, and then Saturn is over, to another masculine sign. So we can see this interesting Saturn is at this crux. So it's we have a lot of things at a corner, right? At a planet, two planets against one, two against one, another two against one. Saturn is in the better position here. It's having, good conversations with Pluto, good conversations with Uranus. It's like, all right, we're all, the outer planet consortium, really, maybe is the word I'm looking for. And then the other one isn't too bad either. Going on the other side, we have this going on right here, these three, but then we also have these three, 1, 2, 3. So we have two outers, but still Mars and Pluto. Pluto's in both. All right, very interesting that we have all of these outer planets, except for Mars, involved in this. Let's see, 1, 2. Just going to count all the players. 2, 3, 4, and then if we go to this one, 5. It's interesting. Now we have to go and connect it over here as well. So we have Saturn squaring, oh, we can't forget that. Saturn and Neptune squaring over to Jupiter. So that, we have Saturn and Jupiter. We just saw that perfecting. What else? And then Neptune will. And then the sun will also get into this mix. So we'll see this a little grouping of squares going on here, this other conversation. So look how dynamic. There is very much volatility in this time right now, very much market change. We don't know how things are going to go. It's very raucous. It's very upsetting. But it's interesting, the elements have shifted. We went from a lot of outwards to we have some inner, ones. Venus is in its home sign, which is kind of nice to have Venus in Taurus. Maybe. We have Jupiter, it's exalted, it's in the sign of exaltation. Um, that's kind of nice. But yeah, it's being shadowed out by a lot of other things. There's a lot of other shouting going on with this cycle. Okay, so this is the meat of the week. This is what we're really coming into. But let's look a little bit more at some other things. We have the moon in right now in Pisces, so that's setting up a little bit more of a spacey, somber, maybe not quite so reactionary. Maybe people are stunned. um, Still have hope, dreamy, but it's going to go into Aries and it's going to go over Saturn and Neptune, and it's going to be a part of this whole complex. So as we go into the next day, I want you to see that, and you can see how the moon, right? It's going to just play into this whole thing. Once it gets over here, let me just go a few hours. So you can see it's going to move, but we'll just track the moon until it gets over. I'll move my thing. Yeah, there we go. So it's just a tilted tilted one now, but you can see the moon is, now making conjuncting Saturn. So it's picking up, whatever Saturn here, restrictions. Wednesday could be another, I think, a more intense day. I think things could intensify. I think in the world, I think it could be, and I don't think it could go very well. I'm hoping I'm wrong. I'm hoping there's some saving grace. I hope there's some underlying things that could make some changes, but it seems very, very tense right now. Um, and it's not going to get better for several days. We looked at those, these quincunxes are going to be in aspect for a week to 10 days. All right, so let's finish getting this around. Let's just see that. So moon will be moving. Um, Wednesday, it will be making aspects to moon, will quincunx Mars, it will, conjunct Saturn, it will square Jupiter, it'll conjunct Neptune, it will sextile or Pluto, a lot of conversations. And then also that day, Jupiter squares Neptune. So let me get it where we can see it a little better. Jupiter squared Neptune. Let's get that Aries stuff over there. There we go. Jupiter. Oh, can you bet that one? Okay, Jupiter square Neptune. Um, it's about the right time. Let me get back on days. Okay, so Jupiter, and then my thing, but it's not doing that right now because it's out of how I have it set up. Let me just get these off now. We're not so inundated with all these lines. We can see one thing at a time. Okay, Jupiter, large, defensive. Um, it could be what's the word I want to look for? Like very sensitive, ultra sensitive, touchy. Being squared by Neptune, so it might be also nebulous things. Being told nebulous things that will scare you, being told untruths, being told things, being told lies, creating illusion to get you to do a certain thing, to get you to be defensive and react. If I threaten you or if I yeah, threaten you or paint a negative picture, it's going to make you be emotionally defensive and reactive. So that's kind of the theme. And then, we have Mercury there being, emotional and reactive too. So it's going to, the monkey mind will, dovetailing in with creating, making mountains out of molehills, and molehills out of mountains. That's the part I'm afraid of. But anyway, it's a tension there. So that reaction, watch that in your own world, things at those degrees that you're, not being overly defensive, overly reactive. And then with the moon going through Aries, it's just a tendency to be harsh, to have um, tough love feelings, speech, speak harshly, shut off the heart. But it might be self-protective because of the disillusionment that it's kind of going through. As it goes through, it might just have to go, close the eyes and ears and go, na, 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 na. Um, and then really go inside and feel and not be just told the things. You've got to sift through all the disinformation, basically. So that's a big part of, Wednesday into Thursday. Um, yeah, so it could be like big information or big disinformation. And it just makes me nervous with these planets at these degrees here. All right, so moving on. Friday, um, let's see, Thursday, we already talked about that a little bit. I already talked about that. Anything else I wanted to tell you here? Basically, we got the solstice coming in a little bit later. Let's see, what time do I have it here? PM. Oh, it will be here the next day. Late. Let's see what time that is. What time does it actually go? All right. It's June 20th. Oh, 10:58 p.m. Almost like 11 o'clock. Yeah, 11 o'clock. Um, yeah, okay. So there we go. Let me get that back around. I don't know, it's just better. When your eyes can see at the top of the chart. All right, so solstice, happy solstice. It's still a nice time of year. It's still, flowers blooming. There's still good in the world all the way around. And I think it's important we just focus on that. Despite a lot of the disturbances, I think it's important we hold love in our hearts and projecting it no matter what through this week. It's gonna be a very intense week. This is one of those weeks that may be very, very historical. But nice moon, and exalted in Taurus, going over to meet up with Venus. Very nice. I think we can try to have a good enjoyment with that. And then, moon will go over with Uranus. Be interesting. Yeah. um, Yeah. What else with that? We already talked about Mars in conjunct. Yeah, we talked about that. See, it's pretty much all the stuff all week. We're just going to get moon aspects, more or less now. We got moon applying to Mars. It's trine Mars, moon sextile Jupiter. Saturday, we come into just more moon aspects, which is kind of interesting. It's just, moving through Taurus. And then we get into busy feelings, when it moves into Gemini on Sunday, later Sunday, late. Yeah, it's not till Monday. Yeah, look at Monday. Yeah, Monday. Um, it's like kind of like the work week. Bing, we start up again here with that kind of busyness, busy emotional energy. What else? We're moving toward the moon in Cancer, which next week definitely will be your emotional. And then we're looking at Mercury also changing signs. It will be moving into Leo. So things, are going to get kind of loud again on that level. It's like Mars just left, but now Mercury's going in there. Okay, so we still are having this dramatic, interplay. And then, when that happens, that's, going to go make the fire aspect is going to go heat up with the planets in Aries, and nothing right now in Sag, but we still have that dingy going on, and then it'll what else did I want to say about that? Just lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, Mercury. Yeah, Mercury. Is then when it's in Leo, then it's going to go make its opposition over to Pluto. Yeah, so then we're going to get into, some uncomfortable depths, more stuff being dramatized, being brought out, being told, being expressed. So we've got a really interesting time, coming through June and then coming into July, definitely as Uranus ticks closer to moving into Gemini. That is going to be very, very key, very, very poignant part of our history of our time that we're moving in, for the next 7 years. Very, very disruptive. Um, very loud, very communicative, but this week is a very intense week. So with all that, be safe, keep spreading and sharing love. Bye for now.